you're doing that, I am going to take a moment to introduce my colleagues and guests. I've already told you who I am. I'm Charl van der Walt. Joining me also from here in Cape Town in South Africa is Vickers Ross. Vickers is a security researcher, a senior security researcher on my team. There he is. Vickers contributed to the chapters this year on vulnerability research and also on threat detection. But he's also an old school researcher with many areas of expertise. Always enjoy having a conversation with him. Welcome, Vickers. Next is a long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm very excited to be joined by Mr. Jay Wang, who is the head of service operations from our capability in Shanghai, China. I had the privilege of visiting Jay there. Was it last year, Jay? And I've been very excited to speak with him ever since. So Jay has both an understanding of the threat landscape in China, but also really hands-on appreciation of how we detect and respond to cyber threats. So welcome, Jay. Then also joining us for the first time, and I'm equally excited about this, is Ben Gibney. Ben is Irish, I think, Ben, but he joins us from the Netherlands. He is did I get it wrong?
I am English.
English, oh God, okay.
Small difference.
To us colonials, you guys all look the same. Ben, my apologies, Ben is English, not Irish, but he is from the Netherlands, or is in the Netherlands. He's a security analyst with our cybersec operations there, but also a experienced researcher who made a significant contribution to our discussion on hacktivism. Then a rapidly growing friendship, I think. A friend of mine is Anis Trabelsi. He works within our AI operations within Orange Cyberdefense, both as a researcher and as a builder. So Anis brings a real practical experience to the question of AI and AI security. We've been speaking a lot, Anis. It's great to have you back. Thank you. And then last but not least, joining us from Singapore is Girish. Girish very graciously said that I didn't have to try and pronounce his surname. So Girish, but I think it might be the most beautiful surname I've ever heard. So Girish, if you could tell us your surname so we can all hear it.
Yeah, it's Girish Ramachandrachari. A lot of A's are there. That's it.
Ramachandrachari. There's a lot of A's. Wonderful amount of A's.
Yeah.
And Girish is a principal cybersecurity architect based in Singapore. Good. So now you know us, and we have the results of the poll. Oh gosh, and this is what we're seeing is that an equal number of people, around 55%, are interested in the topics of vulnerability management and threat detection. So we can definitely spend some time there. 42% of you indicated you were interested to talk about Gen AI, 31% cyber extortion, and 21% hacktivism. So thanks for that feedback. I wonder then on this basis whether we shouldn't start today, Vickers, with you. I know you probably weren't expecting this, but I know that you know what you're talking about. So Vickers authored 2 chapters in this year's Navigator. The one is a data-centric analysis of vulnerabilities, where we see them, what severity they are, what nature they have, etc., which we derive from our Vulnerability Operations Center. And the other is a research topic into kind of what works and doesn't work in vulnerability management. Vikas, one of the things that stands out in your research is the observations you make about risk assessment systems like EPSS and how they lean on the question of probabilities. And how likely is it that we are going to be attacked or compromised based on a certain vulnerability, and therefore how important is it that we patch that vulnerability? And that's really central to the issue of risk management and vulnerability management. And then you also talk about how those scale and how probability changes between a small environment with just a few machines and a big environment with lots of machines. Talk us a little bit through your research and what you uncovered under that heading.
Yes, thank you, Charl, and good day to everybody in the audience. With the research that we've done, I think we can just go to the slide there. We can see more or less just a preface to this, but I'm going to start also with saying that with vulnerability management and vulnerabilities in general, we just want to clarify that we talk about a wide range of things. You know, not necessarily just talking about a software patch or something that needs to be installed. We're talking about misconfiguration or something that doesn't meet a baseline. And also, you know, you start using the word CVEs in there as well. We always, in the West, things about the NIST, NVD, or MITRE, CWE, CVEs, etc. But also to put out there to the rest of the audience that that's just one view of vulnerability as pertaining to software vulnerabilities and hardware vulnerabilities. We also have in China, they have their own national vulnerability database that is following closely to what you see in the West, but also they have their own way of doing things and with their own rules and approaches. So within China's NVD, we can also see a different view of, you know, vulnerabilities, etc. So it would be good to be able to expand that if you can accommodate that in your vulnerability management program. So when I say vulnerabilities, think widely and broadly, not just necessarily one specific thing. And also multiple sources are interesting. Charl touched on EPSS, now the exploit scoring
Vikas, sorry, just to check in with you there. The reason this is important, right, is because the CVE or the China Vulnerability Database creates the reality against which we have to patch, right? That
Correct.
Each one of those CVEs becomes something that we have to consider and bring into our vulnerability management program and make an assessment on, right? So those databases sort of shape our realities when we're doing vulnerability management.
Correct, and that's just from a government point of view. In other words, from what the government's organizations and agencies provide us. And there are other commercial vulnerability databases as well. So depending on where you put your sources from, you can have a wide range of vulnerabilities looking at various things. So looking at the reality, which Charl was talking about the number of these vulnerabilities that we've got to consider, and looking at it from a risk point of view, probabilities are one of those things that's also fun to consider in many things, and in many ways it's also sometimes daunting because you have to get your head around this abstract concept. And in this case, when we look at it from the attacker's point of view, we can see that your attack surface, in an attack surface where there are many vulnerabilities that you don't always have opportunity to patch. From an attacker's point of view, that is just merely almost them trying to be able to identify those vulnerabilities and then able to get into the system. It's most of the time it can be systematic when you're looking from a pen test point of view and so forth, but in general, from the internet's point of view, it's always chaotic, right? And this is where we're trying to put this approach from saying we differentiate skills in attackers. And you're saying when certain attackers are like your script kiddies, your people that just use randomly available scripts and, you know, plug it into some sort of system and then point it at your website and then trying to find a vulnerability, and if they're lucky, they get in. Now, when we talk about luck, right, we can see in this scale here, when you're looking at the attack probabilities here from purely mathematical point of view, you can see that coming from a low skill level, if you would say skill or capability, how many times would this attacker have to attempt exploiting vulnerabilities before they have at least one success, right? And once again, this is a probability. It's not guaranteed that they're going to get a success. They would just have to, get to a point where, let's say, in the A5, which is a 5% probability, they would have to try quite a lot in an environment. In this case, even if they get to 100 attempts in a single shot, they still they only have a 99.9% chance of being successful. But as soon as you raise your skill level, let's say the 40%, all of a sudden that curve drops dramatically, and within a number of attempts, you get to almost like 7 to 10 attempts, you almost get to the same probability, right? 99% chance of getting there. So probabilities from that point of view is interesting. But what is it that is telling us about the attack landscape? Well, from an attacker's point of view, they're trying to get into your system. And then from a defender's point of view, you need to keep those attackers out. There's this interesting concept that security analyst at Microsoft, John Lambert, proposed way back, it's almost 10 years ago now, where he talked about the idea of attackers think in graphs and defenders think in lists. And as long as this is true, attackers will win. But John Lambert also pointed out that defenders have actually got the highest fidelity graph of their own environment, right? They know how this environment is set together or put together. So they can't use that excuses saying we can only defend these things. But anyway, the attackers want to get somewhere on that graph. And the whole idea is if you be able to get a vulnerability and you compromise that vulnerability, you're going to land somewhere on that graph. The attackers typically don't have a great idea, they have a general idea. But from their point of view, they just want to get a foothold. And then from there on, they pivot and move into other areas. So what does it tell us?
Vickers, I just want to pause you there. To make sure I'm understanding. So in your research, what you're saying is we've got this arbitrary database of vulnerabilities, right? Created by the American government or by the Chinese government or by some private vendor. And as defenders, we then have to consider each one of those vulnerabilities as a potential risk, but the volume of it is such that we can never patch all of them everywhere. So that forces us into this kind of risk assessment mindset where we go, okay, how do we determine which of these vulnerabilities we should prioritize and patch, and which ones can we be forced to ignore?
Correct.
Of course, those lists of vulnerabilities aren't everything, as you said. There could be others. It's an arbitrary list that's sort of pushed on us all the time. It's setting the rhythm for our day, right? They're getting shoved in our faces, if you like. And what we then proceed to do is consider which vulnerability on which machine we need to patch.
Correct.
But what you're saying with Lambert's graph is for the attacker, they're not necessarily thinking which vulnerability on which machine can I compromise. They're thinking, where can I get an entry point into this environment? Because the nature of the environment is such that if you land anywhere in it, you can generally move around it.
Exactly.
So for the attacker, the question becomes something entirely different. For the attacker, the question is, how many times must I try before I succeed somewhere? And that's what, if we can just go back to that previous chart, Studio, that's what that chart is showing, that even a relatively poorly skilled attacker, given enough chances, will eventually succeed. And the implications of that, of course, is that it raises the question of whether you can ever effectively patch your way ahead of that curve, right? If attackers got 10,000 vulnerabilities to try, and you reduce that to 9,000 vulnerabilities, that doesn't really change this this presentation of probabilities, right?
Correct. So in theory, it's like as long as there's a opportunity for somebody to exploit, they have a theoretical chance of actually getting in there. Remember, this is a probability as well. So that's the whole thing about exposing yourself to the internet, or actually having some way of somebody exploiting you, that there's a chance that's going to happen, then it will. So ideally, and this is where we get to, I guess, it's like you need to manage that exposure, and you need to manage what is accessible through whatever pathway to your environment.
So then tell us about the role that EPSS plays in that, and how that affects this question of probabilities, if at all.
Okay, so if you look at the next slide, please, the EPSS is the exploit prediction scoring system, in which we actually look at, we plotted all the vulnerabilities in a certain data set here. I think this was a subset from our vulnerability operations center. You can actually look at how these features of this exploit prediction scoring system works in terms of true positives, false positives, false negatives, etc. But in short, coverage is where you always want to be. You want to, that's the top line, or that purple line, right? You want to always be able to cover as much as possible. If you look at the exploit prediction scoring system, which is a probability of the likelihood of vulnerabilities being exploited in the next 30 days somewhere, not necessarily your environment, but somewhere, let's just get that definition right, then you would, ideally, in the perfect world, you want to be at the top left of that chart. You want to be able to patch almost everything. In other words, that means selecting a EPSS score of like very low, right? So that you can patch almost everything as quick as possible within that period, so to limit your exposure. But the reality is, not everybody can do that. Your teams are limited, your resources are scarce, and you have, opportunity costs, and you have to look at things. So you have to make choices. And this is where that efficiency part comes in, that orange line coming from the bottom and then doing this hockey stick almost to the right there. And you'll see that as you patch, your size of your patch set is large, and you move towards the right hand side, in other words, you're decreasing your coverage. You see that purple line sloping down. Your efficiency goes up, right? As well as that blue line, that middle line intersecting there, which is your effort. In other words, the less vulnerabilities you need to patch, your less effort you have, which means your efficiency goes up. So you get this interesting trade-off that you have. And that's where the point is, we have to make trade-offs. What can we afford given the time and resources? And I think everybody in vulnerability management is well aware of that. And this is specifically now to CVEs and patching, not necessarily the others I alluded to, which is just configuration fixes, etc. But the point is, we need to make choices. Are we going to try to be efficient to try and patch something so that we can limit our exposure that we talked about, so the attackers can't have that much, instead of having 10,000 options, they have now only, let's say, we can only patch 5,000, so we patch 5,000, so we've reduced that exposure. But at the same time, we need to be realistic of what we can do. So point A there, saying we're going to go for, let's say, just something interesting, the intersection of where efficiency and coverage is good, but also maybe we want to say, well, we want to be extra good. We say we want to be efficient, and we want to have least amount of effort theoretically in getting a decent amount of coverage. So the trade-off here at the end, we always, in the Navigator, we argue is that efficiency is probably always going to be the deciding factor here, although we want to be good at patching everything.
Vikas, I think that's a really important point. Vikas, by the way, everyone has developed a tool which is available online, I think called the EPSS calculator or something. Maybe we can post a link, Vikas, that allows you to calculate this chart that you're seeing for your own environment to figure out kind of where you'd get maximum patching efficiency based on EPSS. But if we can go to the next slide, Studio, Vikas, the way I understand it then is tools like CVSS, which is a generic ranking system, and then EPSS, which is a more intelligence-based ranking system, basically allow us to prioritize our patching efforts. And EPSS has the added benefit that it's based on real-life intelligence. But in the end, somewhere you're striking a balance between covering all the risks and the amount of resources you have. And if what you leave in the end is a sufficiently big attack surface, then your work on calculating probabilities suggests that an attacker will eventually get in there anyway, right? They just need enough tries, at least probabilistically.
Correct.
And so in the Navigator, we present this framework as an alternative way of thinking about how to manage vulnerabilities, given that reality of scale, efficiency, and probabilities. Can you maybe just in a minute or two give us what the essence of this argument is that you make in the Navigator?
So coming to that conclusion, saying that you need to either, if you're from a proactive point of view, which is a combination of the risk reduction and threat mitigation point of view, versus the whole reactive whack-a-mole style, where you're just constantly trying to catch up and trying to put out fires, is the two give you an option of being rather in control of your destination, or you're going to have to constantly fight with your reality. So the proactive is obviously better, right? You want to be in control of your destiny, and you want to have the ability to make sure that you don't constantly have to fight fires. And the only real way to do that in this world is if you're just trying to catch up the whole time, you're not going to get there. And at some point, you have to constantly make the whole idea of like reducing your attack surface, which is in the risk reduction point of view, right? And that's dealing with proper maintenance governance of your environment, right? Getting stuff in order, in line. So that's that balance you have to strike. But at the same time, you have to stay in touch with what is happening. So that reactive nature of things. So I think from an overall point of view, and I think this is easier said than done, we need to ultimately remove or reduce our attack surface as much as possible, or at least put controls in there, that whole defense in depth argument, like to limit the exposure of these things, or at least to contain it. So when you have to investigate and when you actually have to get to the response side of things, that you have your ducks in a row, so that you can actually manage that vulnerability and that incident better. And this is all about this strategy of actually looking at your overall, adjusting your environment to matching the threat, but also understanding where what it is that you should actually be focusing on, given your resources that you have. And EPS is one of those tools.
Vikas, thanks. I think this the study of EPSS and probabilities is complicated, and the math can bend your mind a little bit. And your arguments about reshaping our approach to vulnerability management sort of present as quite simple in the end, which I think is really good research, right? When you start with something that's really complicated and you come to a really simple conclusion. But I really want to encourage those people joining us today that are interested in the topic of vulnerability management to read this chapter of the Navigator carefully. I think some of the realizations, the truths that Vikas surfaces are really quite fundamental. I wish we had time to talk about them more, but I would definitely point you towards that chapter and encourage you to engage with it, and then reach out if you have any more questions, because I think it surfaces some really fascinating and important truths. With that said, Jay, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, if I may. So one of our panelists, Jerome, is asking whether we see different threats in China than we do in Europe. And of course, Vikas already mentioned that we have different vulnerability databases, which is quite weird if you think about it. There's two truths about what you have to patch. Can you tell us a little bit about how you perceive the threat landscape in China, and how it might be similar or different to what we see in Europe and the West?
Yeah, thanks, Charl, and thanks, Romy, for that question. Yeah, and also this is a very interesting question. We actually consider that during the preparation for this year's of Navigator, we summary all the China CyberSoc, our observations for the attacks and the analysis of them in a structured way and compare with global. What we found is that actually our threat landscape in China is, from the threat perspective, is quite the same with the rest of the world, and also for the techniques and the strategy those hackers they are using. There's no difference. But I do have one thing I want to mention is that what we will observe is the different digital ecosystem we have in China. Because of the data sovereignty strategy, the China government actually banned a lot of softwares from either US or Europe to be accessed in China. So due to this, actually China domestically it developed its own technology. For example, there's our China local payment system, we have local social communication software, we have local cloud solutions. So those are quite different technologies here in this land. And one thing we observed, let's say, take an example. One thing we observed in our red team access with one of our customer, actually, those the employees of those customers, they are widely install WeChat on their company computer, and the red team actually send the malwares through the WeChat to the employee, and the employee actually forward those malwares to the group chat. So everyone with that group in that company got the malware infected. So this is a quite unique attack vectors in China. So because people are widely use those social media, those local technique in their local business operation. So introduce multiple different type of attack vectors in this economy. So that's the things I want to mention. And another thing I want to mention, for the different strategies. Yep. For different strategies, I think it's the culture and the maturity level difference. So although China, the technology and the digitalization grows very fast in the past 1 decade, but compared with other part of the world, the IT security management maturity is still relatively need several years to grow. For example, in the observations we saw most of the customers, for local customers, they still prefer to develop its data leakage protections system. And for most of Western companies operating in China, their first concern is the compliance with the regulations. So the cybersecurity and protect the network. So this is still not the first priority in the past, at least in the past 5 years. Only until recent last year and this year, the companies start to balance either the information security and the compliance and the cybersecurity. So we see the trend. The trend is becoming more balance the investment on those topics. So that's the things we observe differently in the China market. And also, I think that's why we launched this office in China 7 years ago to get familiar with the locals' special questions and provide a more and adjust our solutions and offering to our customers so that for the customers they operate in China, we can be more prepared and getting more value for them. So Charl, that's
Thank you. That's so interesting. I just want to reflect back to you what I'm hearing is, if we look at the Sankey chart, which we've got in front of you now, this is some of the work that Vikas and his team do to analyze the incidents, the nature of the incidents, the flow, if you like, that we report to our clients globally. And we do it every year, and I think the picture that emerges is mostly similar year to year and from country to country. Vikas was telling me that this year we've seen quite a strong shift towards incidents that emerge internally, so from internal actors, and focus on misuse and tend to impact the desktop. But you're saying that if you were to do this chart for China alone, it probably wouldn't look that different in principle. But what is
Yeah.
different is the underlying technology platforms are quite different, that we've got this indigenization of software happening, where a European company may deal with a certain stack and a Chinese company will deal with an entirely different stack. But also, I think really importantly, you were talking about the sort of meta context and how things like culture and language and compliance frameworks that you have to contend with, how those shape the threat. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, sure. That's absolute. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So if you, for example, if you observe, see this figure we are currently showing, most of the incident is about internal employee misuse of their device, or external hackers hack the servers exposed to the public internet. So this is quite the same we have in China. So maybe next in our latest navigators, we may need to add another factors or angles to analyze the text using different technique.
Yeah, that would be an interesting exercise. I can't add another angle right now, but I can add another voice. So, Girish, I wanna rope you in here, if I may. You're based in Singapore. I think you work extensively and travel across the region. And I wanna bring in to the conversation the question of cyber extortion or cybercrime, and specifically cyber extortion. So in the Navigator, of course, for many years now, we've been studying this issue of ransomware as a service, or double extortion, or cyber extortion, or whatever it is that you call it. And I think we've got a slide, Studio, if we may, slide 20, shows how that crime has been changing regionally. So we perceive this year that the crime continues to grow. I think globally we reported 15% more victims than in the past. But we also see quite significant changes across regions. And in this chart, we don't specifically show APAC. I think we've got another chart that will show that in a minute. But I'm curious to hear your view on Jay's comment about like language and culture shaping the crime. And I'm curious to hear what your view is on how real crimes like cyber extortion are in the regions where you operate.
Sure, Charl. I mean, APAC region is a significant hotspot actually for cybercrime, or whether it's a state-sponsored cyber threats, and also the extortion due to because actually of the rapid digital transformation and geopolitical tensions, right? So and that tends actually to a lot of actually the cybercrime trends actually in APAC, whether it's in the form of a ransomware attacks or phishing and social engineering or financial fraud or supply chain attacks. So particularly like if we talk about the ransomware attacks, countries like Australia and India and Japan, where the size of the economy actually is large, based on that actually like a lot of threat with actors actually will be leveraging actually the ransomware to attack actually a lot of enterprises actually out there. And when it comes to the financial fraud, countries such as high digital payment adoption like China and India, and also the Southeast Asia, you will see a lot of attacks actually means out there. In terms of means I would say the cyber extortion, the challenges actually in or I mean pretty much actually about the cybersecurity awareness actually, so which is there, and some of them actually mean some of the countries in APAC actually are having limited resources in terms of the budgets and the expertise in terms of combating it, and also the reluctance actually to report any kind of such attacks. So these are the things which encompass actually in the regulatory penalties. They often actually just shy away actually from reporting such means incidents, right? And I think exponentially the numbers will grow actually means even for 2025. So whether it's Australia or India or even China, because of the large economies and also uh, when it comes to the preparedness actually of a national cybersecurity strategies actually across the nation, it has a significant variance actually in APAC. Whether because some of the countries such as Cambodia, you can't expect them to ready with the cyber or the national cybersecurity strategy. So in that context, actually, I would say overall the numbers would rise, and APAC actually would be still a significant hotspot actually in terms of the cybercrime.
Girish, I think we've got a slide. Can we just dive into the breakdown across countries? I believe it's the next slide in the deck. Studio,
Yeah.
there you go. We've got talk us through this breakdown and how you expect this to change over the next little while.
Certainly, some of the countries will still significantly grow, Shah, like whether it's India or Australia. It's as I told, because of the growing economies actually, and then the rapid digitization actually which is happening across the countries. Certainly, the cybercrime actually or cyber extortion actually victims will grow actually in these countries. And some of the countries, such as Malaysia, like where the regulations actually are being formed and try to contain the cyber extortion actually from a regulatory perspective. So you will start seeing more number of people reporting such incidents. At this point in time, some of them actually will go unnoticed just because actually they're not in the umbrella actually of the regulatory actually compliance. But as and when actually like each of these countries actually are really getting up actually to come up with a lot of the compliance and the regulatory things in terms of reporting such incidents, I think the number actually would be rising actually in 2025.
Thanks, Girish. I can chat with you more later, but I want to rope Ben in here for a moment, our Irish/English college from the Netherlands/Belgium. you know.
Yeah.
Um, Ben, you've been studying this concept of hacktivism, and I know our audience, that they're less aware of it, they're less worried about it, and I think that's a sense that we have, that it is less prevalent or prominent an issue in the region. But in Europe, this issue of state-aligned hacktivism is really starting to shake things up a little bit. Could you very briefly just give us a rundown of what are we talking about when we say state-aligned hacktivism, and what's different about it to previous old school hacktivism, and yeah, what does it imply for us?
Yeah, so to explain that, I'll give a quick, brief context on trying to run through the kind of history of hacktivism very quickly, where it kind of origins in the 80s and 90s. It was very utopian based, it was very ideal driven. People were very kind of positive, and if anybody's feeling down, I would highly recommend you go watch videos of people who are in those spaces in the 80s and 90s. Then we kind of evolved into a kind of angsty teen era of the kind of anti-establishment era, which we saw kind of very prevalent in the 2000s. Kind of Anonymous is one of the most famous groups for that. And then after we kind of had a very strong anti-establishment era with lots of groups operating in that manner, what we've seen more recently was these kind of groups aligned with certain establishments. Often what we've noticed was that they were aligned with certain nation states. It could also be religions in different contexts. And then that kind of created a new different type of threat. And it also at times made it not completely predictable, but there were certain indicators you could see of certain attacks. So for example, on the map you can see on the screen at the moment, there were often attacks related to elections. So they attacked the group that we specifically researched over the past couple of years. This was kind of what we mapped based upon keywords from their own messaging. So if their message included the word election, I think it was the second round of the French elections. Finland had national elections at the beginning of last year. So that was a thing that we did kind of see change, where previously, in previous eras, it wasn't as kind of targeted in that sense. It was basically anybody who is an establishment is a target. Now we're kind of seeing more of a kind of focus and targeted approach, and also at times greater capabilities as well.
So Ben, these actors that we're tracking in, I think we can stay on that slide, Studio, if we may, for just a minute. These actors that we're tracking, they're independent actors, as far as we know. Groups of individuals coming together in quite an organic way, right? They're joining and separating and rejoining, and they've got brands a little bit like the cyber extortion operators do. And then they adopt a cause which is highly geopolitical in nature, right? So as before, it would have been, save the trees, or stop whaling, or things that we could all resonate with. Now we're seeing that they're very like overtly, pro-Russian or pro-Palestinian or pro-Iranian or something, and yet we don't know that they're actually orchestrated by or being controlled by these states. And their technique seems to be to choose a victim that has some kind of symbolic political value, right? So they're not looking to steal money or gather intelligence. They're looking they're tagging, right? They're spray painting or throwing stones. And so they choose kind of any target that I suppose gets them riled up, and then attack that target and then make a big deal about that. Am I getting that right?
I think partially. I think you're on the right lens. I think they are maybe more targeted than you maybe give them credit for in a certain sense. We saw certain trends in that they targeted a lot of transport. They would target a lot of government information sites around the time of an election. So it wasn't as blind as maybe previous forms of hacktivism might have been. And then, yeah, you also have the that aspect to it of they are kind of not just tagging a random building in that sense. Like there are some parallels, I think, even if me personally, I'm happy to say I disagree with a lot of the actions that this group do, but they are still kind of, I think that was a discussion we had to have, is there still kind of hacktivism? And I think it's also illustrated in the poll today, the fact that it was the kind of least requested topic. I think it was related to people not thinking it's a threat. And like most things, it's not a threat until you're the target and then you care. And I think that's another thing that these groups are able to take advantage of, because they're not trying to get money, they're trying to influence countries. One other thing, one of the words was protests and strikes. If there was a protest and strike, any kind of dissent, then that was kind of a thing for them to support, which is, I think, people have seen with other state-aligned operations, whether it's Russia, whether it's US. If they can destabilize an enemy, they will definitely take that opportunity.
Ben, I just noticed there's a question from Kensley via LinkedIn. I think Vicar said he'll respond, but Kensley asks, on this particular chart, why Ireland and Spain have the lowest recorded activity. So just to clarify for Kensley, this is the activity of one group that has one agenda. So the number and the size of the circles kind of indicate the geopolitical cause that particular group is motivated by. Is that a fair conceptualization?
Yeah, and I think it's also the number of circles was just how many times they posted about it. So the actual number of targets is the width. So it may not surprise that that's why the circle around Ukraine is so wide, even though there's only one circle, there was a large number of targets. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, I personally am not certain why Ireland and Spain do. I know that I think Spain was related to members of the group being arrested, and that was more retaliatory as opposed to
mm,
them being a more strategic kind of target, like Poland or an Austria or even a Finland. And
mm,
Ireland was also related to the EU elections, so I think Ireland may have missed being a target at all, apart from that was the same time where I believe quite a few countries were targeted for participating in the EU elections. I hope that
mm.
clarifies it a bit for you, Kensley.
So Ben, thank you. I want to just bring this. We've just got a couple more minutes on this, but I want to bring it back to the region. You observed correctly that people in APAC aren't that concerned, and I think we don't see much of it in Africa. You don't see much of it in Latin America. In Europe, this problem is escalating, and my sense is that a lot of people, and very serious people, are concerned about this problem. I think the one is because it's so unconstrained, right? These actors are not criminally motivated. They're not state governed. They're sort of a bit of a wild card, which makes them scary. The other is because they have a very profound societal impact, right? They're creating mayhem. They're creating confusion, discontent, discord, fear, uncertainty, doubt. And then the third is, of course, that we're also seeing this technical escalation in the kinds of attacks, from maybe benign DDoS to hack and leak to, very intentional attacks, to your point, targeting, critical infrastructure, water, telecommunications, transportation, etc. What would be your message to, people visiting us from, say, Africa and APAC about where to put this threat relative to the other issues that they have to consider?
Well, first off, I'm hesitant being an English person lecturing Africa and Asia and how they should act, given our
I thought you were
introduction to
Irish.
begin
Sorry,
with.
I keep getting it wrong.
Yeah, no. But I think it's also difficult for us to have visibility on it because fortunately this group posts in English. There were examples. I know Indonesia's currently, over the past 5 years, had quite a large hacktivist threat, almost from what I've read, come out of nowhere, and there have been calls for them to update their legislation. Obviously, that's just one country, a very big country, but I think the message is that kind of still stay somewhat alert to it. I feel like, yeah, I'm not an expert on either of those contexts, but I would kind of imagine that there are people who are in that sense, and I would listen to the
Mm,
people who are kind of in the regions and aware, and also for them to learn from what's kind of going on in Europe, and that
mm,
it can help. I wouldn't be surprised if part of the legislation that was being implemented may have been copied from other countries that have gone through these problems earlier. So the way that kind of DDoS attacks can occur, I imagine it doesn't matter whether you're based in Cape Town, Jakarta, or Shanghai. You still need similar types of protections from DDoS attacks. So that I think would be kind of my underlying message, and also to be careful to not underestimate the power that hacktivist groups can have.
mm.
And even if you're not a target today, you could be a target tomorrow.
Well, this on a closing note, Ben, this recent attack by a known hacktivist group allegedly against Twitter/X yesterday is creating a lot of energy and a lot of concern. So I think that shows how quickly and easily they can reach across into another space and have an impact. But I have to leave it there, Ben, because I think there's an important question that I need to ask to Anis. And Anis, I'm sorry that we left you to last here. But all of these issues that we've been discussing, right, our understanding of vulnerabilities, how they discovered vulnerability research, cyber extortion attack techniques, crossing the cultural and language divide to exercise a threat in a different cultural context. And then, of course, hacktivism and the messaging behind hacktivism. All of those things are potentially being exacerbated or impacted by the emergence of Gen AI. Can you talk us through that? Like, how is Gen AI really, how is it impacting the landscape?
Well, basically, it's getting easier and easier to use Gen AI for attackers, and no need for them to be specialists in that field. Basically, with these new tools, which will create videos, images, and LLMs and GPT-like tooling, we can see an increase of and facilities to attack, to have some attacks like spear phishing, more specialized and targeted phishing. We can see deepfakes as well, especially online meetings company scam due to the higher quality of the videos and the facility with the tooling. We can see content generation for disinformation on social network as well. And zero-day vulnerability research, which easier with LLM through software documentation, for instance. So yeah, we can see several new way to have some attacks through this new tooling.
So, Anis, thank you. You and me have discussed this. We've debated this a lot, and I want to give you the final word on this topic. Is the impact of Gen AI on the threat, is it substantial and real, or are we creating a storm in a teacup? Like, how much is Gen AI going to exacerbate the threat?
I'll say there is a high potential. We can see on social media, we can see on deepfake, we can see there is new attacks on this side, definitely. And maybe the theory is about the high potential of this tooling. I think it's a very good point because, of course, Gen AI, computer vision, extra is not new. We can see this type of deepfakes since, or this type of attack, I will say, the beginning since several years. But we can see an acceleration through the easiest way of using this tool. And this is I can see, maybe we will see, like we have phishing kit today, maybe we will have in 2 years, 3 years phishing kit, spear phishing kit with Gen AI included. We can see warm GPT, for instance. Warm GPT is a variant of GPT used by attackers. So the attack is here. The attackers use it, and there is a high potential of acceleration of the use of this type of attack.
Anis, thank you. I have so many more questions to ask, but I need to give Girish the opportunity to make a closing comment. Girish, I was hoping you could just in a few minutes give us an idea of how people who have the Navigator in their hand, how they can make value from it. And then to our panelists, just to let you know that we're going to officially end the session in about 5 minutes when Girish is finished. But then the panelists have kindly agreed to stay on. So if you have more questions or you want to listen to a bit more discussion, then please stick around. We'd love to talk more. But in the interest of time, I just want to give Girish the opportunity to just close it out for us and give us some advice on how you actually use this document in the real world.
Thanks, Charl. So, like, our customers are using Security Navigator in different ways, actually, where it can be benefited. So, I mean, there are a number of ways. Like, the first and foremost, actually, is about the security awareness and training. The insights, actually, that has been present, actually, in the Security Navigator report can be used for the internal training sessions so that all the team members actually are aligned with the current threats actually and best practices. That's one way actually of utilizing actually the insights of the Security Navigator. The second one is about the industry specific threat intelligence, whether actually it can be the financial, or actually it can be shipping and logistics actually, or it can be manufacturing, or like our Security Navigator report actually is a very comprehensive one actually, where we have listed the threat intelligence per industry. So that gives actually a good comprehensive visibility of what kind of threats actually lurking actually for actually specific industries, so that our customers actually can take advantage actually of implementing the sufficient countermeasures actually for it. And also in terms of the internal collaboration, sharing the threat intel actually with the within the organization actually, or between the organization. So the findings actually what has been shared in the Security Navigator report will be quite insightful and quite helpful in terms of sharing it, and coming up with risk mitigation strategies actually, right? And the next one is about supporting business cases actually for cybersecurity investments. So organization who have successfully secured funding actually for a specific industry vertical can look at actually the Security Navigator report, get the insights, get the recommendation, and use that actually as a business case for future cybersecurity investment, right? So the next one is about enhancing the vulnerability management and
Girish, Girish,
yeah.
I'm going to cut you off there. Thank you. I think it's clear, and I really appreciate how you and your colleagues make use of the Navigator, and of course also how you your experiences guide us, right, in what we talk about, how we talk about it, how we present it. I think it's a really nice collaboration. I wanted to let our listeners know that there is a survey that's circulating specifically about the Navigator, what you take away from it, where it works for you, what it doesn't do. And we really would appreciate your feedback. Just like we get feedback from Girish and Jay and our colleagues on the ground, we'd also like to get feedback from you that can help us really turn it into a resource that's of value to you. On that note, we have hit the hour, and I'm aware that the hour is what you committed to. So if you have to leave now, I want to say thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate that you have a variety of airlines you can choose to fly with. So thank you for flying with us today. And thank you to my panelists, Ben, Girish, Vikas, Jay, Anis. I know it takes a lot of effort to prepare for and participate in these sessions. Just so you know, it's appreciated. It's a pleasure to speak to people who are authentic experts in their space. Having said that, have a wonderful day, have a wonderful week, and we are going to continue the conversation for a few more minutes. As long as I think there are people who are interested to stick around and hear it. So maybe, Anis, we can pick up then where we left off on the conversation of Gen AI. I've been pushing you on the question of how much does Gen AI shift the landscape. You were saying it isn't new, and I recall we had a conversation with Ben where Ben, you were saying it's not new because you worked on it. What was it? 8 years ago? 10 years ago? Would you briefly just tell us that story about Gen AI based fake video and its origins, I suppose?
Yeah, no, I can briefly mention during my degree, which was about just over 5 years ago now, I got, I think, slightly frustrated during the discussion we had about how we kept using the word new, and I think Anis did rightly correct me after I made my point and explained also previously about all the new features to it. And why it is a newer attack now. But no, I did my thesis on 2020 around GPT-2, actually, at the time, was the latest model, and the kind of general GAN architecture, which the field has now evolved a lot past that. And I think it's important when having these discussions around Gen AI that we are able to remember that there are people like Anis and colleagues who this isn't new to. These defenses, there's detection methods for deepfake specifically. They're obviously not perfect, but there's certain tells or giveaways which people have been looking at for the past decade. The architecture's almost about a decade old now, if you, depending upon who you actually credit as coming up with the models. And there have been public examples since 2019. I know there was an example of a Malaysian politician. There was footage of them doing illegal acts that they claimed were deepfakes. There's examples of numerous university courses over 5 years old, if you look at them, introducing their courses using deepfakes. But I can also now give it back to Anis for him to correct why the points that he did make it when I brought these up for the rest to hear a more complete answer to whether they're new or not.
Well, I think if I may, Ben, I think the other point for me is not so much whether the technology is new, but whether it's fundamentally different, right? Like security is a discipline that's built on some kind of fundamental concepts, right? That like the idea is you should be able to assert that something is secure by saying we can ensure its confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Rightly or wrongly, that there is this sense of this is a formal discipline and we can assert security. So my question is actually to what extent Gen AI as part of the threat landscape changes the fundamentals of what we do. And I want to bring that question back to you, Anis, and ask now we've got this new technology in our hands and in the attacker's hands. And I kind of want to focus now on the idea that the technology is in the attacker's hands. How does that change our behavior? What do we do differently that we didn't have to do before?
Yeah, basically, LLM are used widely in companies with ChatGPT or other. So there is an increase of data exposure. If we can see the top 10 OWASPs, there is several threats directly coming from the use of LLM. And one of the most of them is shadow AI. If we are using a company provider LLM, and we provide sensitive information of my company, it will be directly accessible for the LLM provider, which is something new. We didn't get that before. It's new tooling, very powerful. That's why everybody use it, and there is a good reason of it. But when we say that, how it will be possible to secure this new usage? So definitely, I go back to your question, Charl, with that. And yeah, there is several ways to secure that. First of all, we need to know that perimetric security, like classical security, will cover, I will say, 85% of the security, which is very important to know because security of API, security of several applications, etc. It's very important because it will cover a big part of the security. But more of that, there is several threats like data loss prevention, like other, which will need several specific security. So that's why we are talking about data security, how it will be possible to manage more data. So above data loss prevention, we are talking about data security posture management, how to implement a data security posture management in order to know that data are controlled by companies, which is very important. And then we have prompt safety as well, how we will use technologies in order to control what is provided to other ChatGPT. So that's why we are talking about firewall AI and proxy LLM and such technologies. So it's important to make, I will say, risk assessment specifically to LLM use cases. Why not performing pen testing and vulnerability scanning of LLM API and integration, which could be a good point as well. And then, as I said before, implement robust input validation and sanitization to prevent prompt injection, which is a specific threat as well. The corruption of the prompt in order to corrupt the answers as well. And that imply monitoring LLM output as well, which is very important, and evaluate security practice coming from LLM provider if the company is using a specific LLM provider. So covering all of these threats, and I will say stay informed about emerging LLM security threat as well and best practices, because it's a technology evolving very fast. That's why we can see a lot of new functionalities and coming with possibly a lot of threats. So that's why keeping and stay informed about emerging LLM security threats could be a best practice as well.
Anis, thank you. That's super interesting, and I'm hoping that your comments have answered some of the questions that have been coming in. So, just to be clear, I think what LLM has shaped the landscape for us in two ways. The one is that it exacerbates the threat and potentially, arguably, introduces new threats, but certainly exaggerates the existing threats. But on the other hand, the application of the adoption of these applications really exacerbates the problem for defenders. And I think sometimes in some fundamental ways. So if I look at this, if I look at this chart of yours, we've got, access security, we get that. Infrastructure security, we kind of get that. Model safety sounds like data security we have. But then things like prompt safety and AI visibility, these are new things, right, that we haven't had to deal with before. And I think it's very interesting to see how those things are going to play out. But I want to draw our colleagues from APAC back in, Girish and Jay. I'd be very interested to hear, if you have an opinion, I don't want to force you, but if you have an opinion, either of you, how you perceive the market around AI solutions, AI adoption by your clients in the region, and also what the perception is of the threat introduced by these applications in your regions. Maybe we can start with you, Jay.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, actually, when we prepare our navigators for this year, one issue with generative AI is really something I really can't agree more. So not only with so we talk about the new threat generated introduced by the generative AI, and also we talk about the hackers using AI, and also the defenders use AI. But also another thing got my attention is that the afraid of not adopting AI for the companies and the organizations. So it's quite, if you see the news in China or Asia Pacific, many companies or many organizations they buy hardware and implement their on-premise generate models or agent to build their AI solutions. So every company is afraid of miss this new innovation or new age, new evolution technology. So that's something really interesting. And also, if you see the news 2 months ago, the DeepSeek introduced a new technology, and also this week we also see another news from Alibaba. They have a newer model, which is a more cheaper hardware requirement than the DeepSeek, and those kind
Oh,
of
wow.
cost reduction. Yeah, really, they are going to change the world. So for AI, a lot of business actually they are expecting AI to bring new business model, and also we see companies the AI will increase the efficiency of some of their work, and also we know that if the efficiency reach a certain level of threshold, it will change the business model because some of the business model is because of the efficiency on some work you can achieve. But if the efficiency reach another level, it will change the business process. So I think this is also the companies that's why they're spending money with AI with these AI solutions. They're afraid of losing this new competition.
So,
Charles,
Girish,
just a quick. Yes, sure.
yes,
Just
go
to
ahead.
complete a little bit something I missed just before is, yeah, we're talking as well as AI SPM. I mean AI security posture management. That's why we can see the use of AI in companies is more and more, as you can say, Jay, is a lot of companies build their own AI on premise with their own hardware, and that's why we can see now the emergency, the not the emergency, but the rising of AI SPM, AI security posture management, which is a new field with AI visibility as well.
Yes.
I want to bring Girish in briefly, if I may. Girish, in this apparent tension between the risk of adopting AI and, as Jay said, the risk of not adopting JI. What's your perception of the logic in your region? How are clients thinking about it? Where are they falling on that continuum?
I think my thoughts are pretty much similar to what Jay expressed, Charl. Like one, yes, they are thinking actually they're going to miss out, and some actually like okay, they are heavily investing actually on the on-premises. No, I mean, Gen I with equipments actually or anything. They're trying to build their own actually LLMs by leveraging actually either publicly available, whether it's DeepSeek or ChatGPT actually, etc. But off late, what I'm seeing is even the technology vendors actually are coming up with AI security solutions, as what Anish was highlighting, AI security posture management, which is kind of a burst from some of the technology vendors actually that we work, which haven't seen actually in the last 6 to 8 months before. But right now, actually, yes. Though customers actually might not have a full visibility of what they're developing actually in terms of the LLMs, but some kind of guardrails actually are being proposed actually by the technology vendors, which seems actually quite logical for me. So customers needs to first do the risk assessment actually in terms of adopting AI and see what is the potential risks actually that they would actually encounter, and then build actually the controls actually around it. And I think the posture management actually would be the first one to start. So this is something on two ways actually. Like I'm seeing one, some of the organizations are trying to leverage the LLMs actually, which are available natively in the public cloud, whether it's Amazon actually or Azure, but some of them actually are building their own inside the actually data centers. So for both the cases, I think they need to look at holistically. They need to look at actually what are the broad risk areas actually that they need to be aware of, and then build the security controls around it.
Thank you, Grish. I think I'm gonna take one more question on AI, and then Ben, I maybe want to end with you, kind of back on the hacktivism question. So this question is from Ahmed and Vikas, I want to direct this to you, if I may. Vikas has also been spending a lot of energy investing into the question of AI security for our team. And Ahmed is asking about a point we make in the Navigator. It's sort of a throwaway point where we quote, I think it's a different statistic that says that 96% of C-suite leaders expect AI to increase productivity, and yet only 77% of employees say that their productivity has in fact increased. What's your sense on that tension between, what the AI vendors are saying this technology is going to do for us, and what it's actually capable of doing? I know that's a big question, but if you could just give us your thoughts on that in just a minute or two.
Well, I assume you're talking to me, Charl.
Yes, please,
Okay.
because
Well, I think, it's difficult to say because this like if you look at it from the bigger technology landscape, this Pandora's box has been opened, and there's no way to close the lid and put whatever was in there back in, right? This is done and dusted. This technology is going to be with us. It's going to define and shape much of what we do down the line. And I think with much of previous technologies, from computing way back, if you look at now purely from information systems and stuff, we've seen these definitive technologies come in, and they actually evolve over time. Internet is a good example. Now we carry it with us everywhere in our pocket. So I think, in general, the consensus is that this technology is a game changer. It's going to change what we do, how we work, how we consume information, how we interact with our computers or computing systems, or even ourselves. If you've been tracking the next phase of this is employing AI or these large language models specifically to enhance how computers do tasks on our behalf, AI agentic systems, etc. These are these imagination of how we can employ these things besides just sitting there having a conversation with a browser or an app on your phone.
With a chatbot,
actually getting productivity out of it, doing things parallel to what you're doing. So the whole promise is to be able to be more productive, right? The whole productivity point is always coming up, like this question by Ahmed saying expectation from our managers to be more productive, but at the same time we as the workers are feeling pressure in making this work, and having that payoff, cross, so everybody can say, yeah, this is working. And I think that's something that's not going to be achieved immediately. It's going to emerge over time, and as we learn how to use this productivity tools or these things, even also your staff needs to be educated how to use tools correctly, how to use it productively. Like if you don't use Word or Excel productively because you don't know all these other features, it's merely a skills gap that needs to be covered. But also, I think it is unrealistic from the get-go to get this going immediately. I think there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of excitement about it, but that needs to be toned down, and I think it needs to be brought back to look at what is current productivity and how do we measure it, and what is the expectation of where it should be. I think ideally is we should be better off now being able to do more creative, more things that is exclusive to the domain of human almost. But it doesn't really help much then when people invest lots of money and they want to have a return on investment. I think that's always the problem. I'm busy. We've released a blog post on this topic as well this week, where I actually looked at I explored the whole thing, but in terms of what Satya Nadella from Microsoft has said about what he expects AI should bring to this industry, and he wants to see a GDP growth, like worldwide GDP growth, and the increase of, if we can make the world economy grow by X%. Now this is in real terms of GDP. He was mentioning figures between 5 and 10%. Now that's quite extraordinary numbers if you look at it from a world economic growth perspective. To get the world economy to grow in this current climate, or even in the next 5 years, I think by 10%, would effectively mean that we have to add a couple of small or even large economies as a new contributor to the world economy. For example, we have to add the whole economy of Germany, for example, to lift that again. So it's quite an extraordinary expectation. I think this, like, no pressure on all the people building these AI products, but
I was
that
going to say no pressure on this.
yeah. So in other words, what Microsoft is hoping is that they will get the benefit from it as well, but they don't expect them to be the only benefactor from this. Everybody in the world should benefit from it. That's what the altruistic idea is. But in this world we're working in, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be an equal or a balanced gain in productivity. Some people or some companies and some countries are going to probably benefit faster and quicker than others. And that's why you see this race almost to get all these AI products and AI capabilities out there, and everybody can do it. And it's clearly a new, I would say, division in the world. Some people have likened it to almost a new nuclear arms race. I don't think it's that dramatic, but unfortunately these systems do have the promise of, when you look at it from AGI, or artificial general intelligence, which these claims are that we're going to get there in the next couple of years. If you look at some Demis Hassabis said that 50% chance by 2030. That's actually quite a cop-out statement, but basically he's saying it's going to it's a 50-50 chance that we're going to get there, and all depends on breakthroughs. And we saw with the excitement that I think Jay mentioned, DeepSeek, and all these other new ones that's coming out, that revolution or that new way of approach of things doing, how that quickly just shakes up the market, and everybody have to scramble. I think there's a new one also I saw they used diffusion learning on text. I think Anis can help me. I think it's Mercury that did that, the way that they generate code from using a diffusion approach, which is normally used in image generation. It's just a way to have less iteration. So once again, this technology is moving so fast that I think management is still playing catch up, right? They have to have a long-term strategy. So I think you play this as a long-term strategy, understand what is your expectation to raise your productivity, but also helping your staff, your knowledge workers, everybody in your organization to get there, because AI has the ability to enable people, but at the end of the day, if people don't know how to use a tool effectively, it's just going to sit there not doing much. Anyway, I hope that adds some to your question.
It does. I wonder, Studio, if we can also post a link to Vicus's blog series, because some of his points that he raises are really fascinating, and it gives us a sense, I think, of just how much the world is changing. There are still probably more questions than we can cover, so I'm going to make an executive decision and choose one last one before we finally say goodbye. And Ben, I'm going to aim this one at you. It's slightly philosophical, and it came in, I think, also from Ahmed, who gets the prize for keeping us on our toes the most today. And he points to a section in the report where we say perception is reality, and talks about the challenge of responding to an incident, and how we regain the trust of our clients. And I'm interested in hearing your view on this, kind of from a philosophical point of view, and particularly sort of honed in on you, because I think that hacktivism is really an attack on our relationships with each other, and on our trust and the faith we have in the systems, in our governance, in our governments, and each other. And I guess that many other kinds of incidents are the same. Cyber extortion is certainly actually an attack on the trust that stakeholders have in an organization, right? That's what compels them to pay the ransom. So I just wondered, on a closing note, if I gave you 3 minutes, how do you perceive the role that trust plays, and how do we think about preserving trust in a situation where the adversary is actively targeting it in these ways?
No, I think it's an important thing to think about, and as mentioned earlier, it's one of the key motivators of a lot of these groups is to kind of disrupt and spread a certain level of fear, and if people are perceiving fear, then they're also kind of experiencing it in that sense. And I think it also relates to the point that Goresh mentioned earlier about the countries with more money are more likely to be the ones that are targeted more in that sense. I think the way that the trust works, in the way that the kind of background record, I guess, is a certain level of establishing trust, as if you have kind of examples of experience experts, for example, is a certain level of trust. And at least linking to the kind of more philosophical aspect of it, I think there is a certain level of faith that needs to be involved in trust. Like, I think we have the buzzwords of quantum, we have the buzzwords of AI, and another one that I'm hearing a lot of is zero trust. And that's a way that in which we kind of are learning to adopt and operate. And I think that is a certain level of the way the world we live in, that I think Vickers also indicated that I would love to be able to trust Microsoft and that they have my best interest at heart and they want to really make everybody's life better. And the C-suite people that believe that their employees' productivity is going to go up, and all the employees can be replaced by AI, but never a board member for some reason. And these kind of ideas, I think, all instill trust both within the company. I think there's no way that the customers can trust us if we don't trust each other within Orange Cyberdefense. And I think it is kind of something that you build, like any relationship. I personally, maybe this is my own issue, rarely trust people on day one. I will trust them a bit, but I will need to verify whether that trust is warranted. And I think that's the message I think a lot of the customers should have, where they can trust us, but they do need to verify whether that trust is been placed correctly.
Mm. And I think on a closing note, for all of us in security, whether you're on the supplier side, like we at Orange Cyberdefense, or whether you're on a consumer side, I think the mission is that process of building and retaining trust. And as you said, it happens gradually over time. It's easily lost, and I think the challenge is to be consistently reliable, to consistently demonstrate that your stakeholders can have faith in you. And I think that's the counter to all of these things. If that faith is there, then you can weather a compromise, you can weather a DDoS. People don't lose faith in you instantly if they've learned to trust you over time. All right. And with that, folks, we're now at hour, and I don't think I can keep you any longer. So thank you again, Ben, Garish, Vickers, Jay, Anis, for your time. I really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you to everyone who stuck with us this long. Please make a point of downloading the Navigator. Please have a look at those blog posts and other references that we mentioned. And we really look forward to... Oh, please take a moment to complete the survey. And we really look forward to seeing you out there fighting the fight and earning trust. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.